Okay, welcome everyone. We'll get started as more people continue to join. So I'm Megan Wright, the Marketing Associate at Grober Nutrition, and I'll be the host and moderator of today's webinar. Also joining us from Grober is Serena Lamont, one of our young animal specialists. And Serena will be giving us a presentation a little later on about nutrition, care, and management of lambs and kid goats. So here's a quick overview of today's webinar. We'll be starting with the eco-feeder portion from Forster Technik, followed by a question period, and then move on to our presentation from Serena, and another question period at the end before we wrap things up. So as you saw on the previous slide, we'll have 10-minute question periods after each presentation. Feel free to submit your questions throughout each presentation. Just on your Zoom toolbar, you should see a Q&A button with little speech bubbles. So just type your questions in there whenever you think of them. And then at the end of each presentation, our speakers will be happy to answer them. So this webinar is being recorded and it will be sent out to everyone who registered within the next couple of days to rewatch. Now let's get started with our guest speaker. So Jan Ziemerink is CEO of Forster Technik and provides on-farm technical support worldwide. Jan went to agricultural school in Holland and afterwards worked in various parts of the world before immigrating to Canada in 1987, where he managed a veal farm and introduced automatic calf feeders. For the last 25 years, he has helped improve automatic feeders and make them more farmer-friendly. Jan provides training to help farmers and dealers successfully work with automatic feeders, and we are excited to have him joining us today. So with that, I will pass it over to Jan.
Here we go. Let's start in the beginning. Okay, well, thank you very much, Megan. Welcome, everybody. What I want to do in the next 15-20 minutes, just talk a little bit about the eco feeders, what we call this, the ad-lib feeder for lamb and kids. Again, if there's any questions, let us know. And I'll try to read the questions as we go, or I will do it at the end. To start with the eco feeders, the basic information, we have only one kind available for North America. If you see maybe the brochure, you see maybe 3 or 4 different versions. But for North America, we only have the 2.8 kilowatt, 240 volts North America version available. Reason is very simple, has to do with power, what we use here in North America. And also it is not very cheap to get them all certified for North America. So these feeders are completely certified to run in North America. If you look at the brochure, it might say that a 2.8 kilowatt, the 2.8 kilowatt, that is the amount of power that it does for the heating, comes with 6 stations. In our case, we do have 8 stations. So it's a special order what we do. It's 8 stations. All the feeders have this available. All the feeders have the fly screen included. The heating jar, the heating around the heating jar is included. We got 8 adjustable nipple brackets. And we also got the header tank for the water pressure included. Here you see the header tank. That is a must. You have to install this tank. You cannot go directly on the water line. And the reason we do that is very simple. When I started in 2001 selling these feeders, at that time they were called eco feeders, but still a similar feeder, we had too many problems with not being exact amount of milk replacer and water being used. And that had to do with the water pressure. The water pressure was constantly fluctuating. If you're familiar with our auto feeders for calves, we are going directly on the water line, but there is a different reason. There is a water meter inside. And if you would install a water meter inside an eco feeder, all of a sudden the price is going to increase by about $1,500, $2,000. So that's the reason we are not done this. The header tanks work great. Install them about 7 feet high, just a little bit to the right of the feeder so that if there's a leak, it doesn't leak on the feeder. Okay. When you install the feeder, make sure you set the feeder up in a dry, frost-free area, separate from the animals. Animals like to lick on stuff and like to knock stuff over, so make sure it's in a safe environment. Try to have a drain around there if possible. It's very important to have an extra ground cable. So if you purchase a feeder and you talk to the electrician to run your 240 volts, you run a cable with plus, minus, and ground, you need one more ground. And that extra ground should be hooked up on the outside of the feeder, what we call by the potential meter. And that is the bolt right what you see on the picture there. Okay, that's very important that we have a ground wire on that. Okay, the reason is if there's any static electricity in the barn and it's on the feeder, it might give the wrong signal to the sensors. So the sensor might think it's full, but it's not. Okay, so it's very important. You connect the water lines, connect the nipple brackets. Always have the young animals close to the feeder, and the older ones can have a longer line. Installations, this is a little bit up to yourself, how you want to have the height of it, but it is about approximately, that gives you an idea. Very important to know is that the height of the nipple should never be lower than the milk in the mixing jar. So the level of the milk, so that you don't have a siphoning problem, okay? You can put it as low as you want, but don't put it too low, because if the nipple has a little hole in it and there's pressure, it might happen that the milk keeps running out, okay? So that's important. So the components of the Eco Feeder is very simple. It's a powder hopper, what you see on the top, holds about 35 kilos. We got handles to lift it. We got our interface or control unit, whatever you want to use it. The boiler container with the temperature sensors inside. And there you see the intensive mixer. I will show you in a minute a different mixer what we now have, but that's the mixer jar with the 8 nipple nozzles. We got a mixer heating, and we got a fly protection door. So here you see the boiler. Again, this is a 2.8 kilowatt. The boiler is very simple, works very good. It's important to know that after about 3 or 4 years, you should take the boiler out and clean the elements, okay? It can happen that if you're and depends on your water. If you have soft water, you're probably okay for 5, 6 years. If you got very hard water and you're putting quite a few lamb or kids through the feeder, you might want to do it after 3 years. Because if you don't do it, it will build up with soot and the heating capacity will go down, so it will not heat up as quickly. And also if it builds up too much, build up inside that container, the white container, what you see there on the left side, that could actually damage the elements, okay? And on the right side, you see the mixing jar. This is a new mixing jar. The next picture, this one shows it a little bit better. So as of about a year ago, we went to a different mixing jar. We call it a bayonet lock. So you can take the mixing glass off without any tools. So it's a quick coupling, so you can clean everything. Also, the nice thing is that the sensors are now quick coupling. So it's not as before where a sensor broke that you had to replace the whole jar. It's a lot easier. Just make sure you put everything back together correctly and do not pull out the mixer unit or the little mixer thing. Do not pull that out unless you have the glass off, okay? Otherwise you might damage it. Just a little tidbit there. Here's the boiler interface, how it all works. You see there on the top, first one is the auto. So if you press that and the green light is on steady, you're in automatic feeding. So that means it's feeding. Next to that, you see the little, looks like a temperature gauge. That is the boiler temperature. So when you press that, you see the temperature of the boiler. It's the boiler temperature, not the temperature in the mixing jar. Okay, it's important to know. And then you have a counter. You see the C, the top one to the right there is a C, that is a reset portion counter. So per day you can see how many portions it makes. If you want to reset that, you just hold that and it will reset it. And reset the portion. So I mean, we don't keep track how much we mix, but you could do that. If you do that every morning around the same time, then you have a pretty good idea how much portions were mixed in the 24 hours. So you have a good idea what you mixed up. Okay, then you can stop the mixer motor so that the mixer runs. You can stop the water. That's the second one with the little tab. You can do the powder motor. And the other one is heat up the boiler. So that is for cleaning. So if you press that button, it heats up to the maximum temperature for for cleaning. And it could go up to 55 degrees. Okay, so if you want to clean, you want to run a cleaning cycle, you just press that, it heats up till 55 degrees. And then you just start the cleaning, and then it mixes for 180 seconds. On the bottom there, the bottom part, you see I just powder water portion temperature. That is then for the calibration. Okay, so if you want to calibrate, you always calibrate the water first. You set the amount of water, but I'll get back to this a little bit later. But that's what the calibration is for. Okay, and same with the start plus and minus. So the working principle of this feeder, it's an aluminum feeder, so it just mixes as you go. So every time the mixer electrode is free, you make a new portion. And the portion stays in the mixer until the animals drink it. Or it's empty manually, so somebody empties it. So it's not automatically like the auto feeders, like the calf feeders do. So sometimes I get a call, or actually I had this last week, somebody called me up, they just installed a feeder. And they said, hey, we only got 20 or 25, in this case, with kids on it. What do I do? Because I don't want the milk to get cold. So to me, it's very simple. You run it for a couple of hours, turn the machine off, run it for a couple of hours, on around 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. These animals, they will know when it's on and how everything works. Okay. The portion in the mixer is mixed after a set time range. So when the portion is in the mixer, the default time is 5 minutes. So after 5 minutes, we spin the mixer for about 2 seconds. Okay. I'll come back to it later. You can actually set that. If the feeder works good, the LED light is on, like I mentioned, and the feed is prepared. Want to stop this, you need to press the automatic button. Okay, or you shut the feeder off. And the portion size is adjustable for calibration. So it doesn't have to be done, but if you think, especially when you buy a feeder from somebody else, this could be done. Carry out a new installation. You can bring the feeder back to factory settings. Very easy. You hold the start and the C button at the same time. If it shows 0 in display for the reset, then you reset to factory settings. Before starting up, I would always run automatic mode by pressing the auto button. You press the C, heat up the water to 55, hold the dose water, add some detergent if you want. Press the water, and then you let it run for 3 minutes. And it will stop. Okay. Also, then when you start up, you set the feed temperature, so that's important. So you press the temperature setting, and then you go to plus or minus, set your temperature. It is already set for 42 degrees. That normally is okay. But if you find that the milk when you should take a temperature of the milk, of course, after it's mixed. And if you find it's too cold or too warm, you can set it yourself. So you can set a temperature anywhere between 10 and 44. Okay. But make sure it's not too cold, because the milk needs to be mixed at around 40, 42 degrees. And also be careful if it is not too hot, because the animals might not like that. There's a temperature difference of 3 degrees between the minimum and the maximum. So anytime the boiler temperature is 3 degrees below what you're asking for, it will actually stop feeding. Okay. But it will start up again. So now we get into the calibration part. So I like to set it normally around to 350 mil to 400 mils. Depends a little bit how many animals you have. If you're going to go up to 70, 80 animals or more, then I would say yes, set it for 400 mils. If you only do maybe 30, 40 animals, you can set it for 300 mils. Just make sure you have enough water in there that once it adds the powder, that it doesn't splash all over the mixing jar. Okay, if you find that, then you have to increase the water level a little bit. You press amount. If you want more, you press the plus button. If you want less, you do the minus button. Same thing for the powder. So what you have to do, you got to do your math, and I think Selena will talk about it, but I think normally you look at about 180, 190 grams per liter. So you have to, if you do 300 mils, so you got to do the math, how much powder that is for 300, okay? And you do the same thing. You press the powder calibration button, start. You catch it and you measure it, okay? You make sure that you don't make a mistake. You measure, if you put it into a cup, make sure you measure the cup first, okay? Or you share the cup first, so that you're not adding the cup to the amount of powder. We have a couple of additional settings on the feeders. I'm not always necessarily saying that you should change them, but if there is issues or you find it could be a problem, we can do that. So first you stop the feeding, then you press the start and the minus button at the same time. Then you can choose a menu, P1, P2, P3, or P4, okay? The break between intermediate mixing is P1, so that is intermediate mixing is P2, mixed delay is P3, and cleaning temperature is P4. So what it is break between intermediate mixing. So what that is the time after it makes a mix and the milk sits there, how long it takes before it does a spin. So that is normally, our default is 300 seconds or 5 minutes. What is normally okay? The mixing time at that time, so when it after the 5 minutes, when it does mix, it runs for 2 seconds. So it's a quick mix just to keep everything in suspension. Then the mixer delay, so that is the time that the water falls. So when it making a new mix, you don't want powder to fall right away. First, we want water to fall, so that there's water in the mixing jar before the powder comes. So there's a 3-second delay. And then you can also increase for example, you can set the cleaning temperature. What is the default of 55? What is normally fine? But you could go to 58. But keep in mind, the higher you go, the longer it takes for the temperature to get there. So if you're waiting for the temperature to get there, it might take a little bit longer. Also, when you use a detergent to clean, try to buy a low temperature detergent. It works always better. Okay, there are those are on the market. Most of the dairy equipment companies, like Lily, Gia, they will have low temperature detergents on the market because they use them also for the cat feeders. So talk a little bit about error codes here. When an error code comes up, for example, we have E1 to E5. If E1 comes up, that means the electrode is not covered for some reason, okay? So what you do is you fill up the mixture, make sure the electrode is covered by your physical C. If it's still not recognizing it, then make sure the electrode is clean. That is most of the times the problem, that the electrode is just dirty. And sometimes you can see the dirt. So you can use a little scrub pad or something just to clean it very good. Sometimes there's a little a rope or something is attached to the electrode. So just check that. In worst case scenario, what we have seen in very limited cases where the water is very clean, so you might have a water purifier system going or something like that, there is a potential meter on the board that you can set. Okay, but be very careful with that one. That is tremendously sensitive. So before anybody touches that potential meter, I would recommend that you put a little mark with a pen or pencil where it is. So when you start turning it, you always know how to go back. Okay. If you have an E2 that's overheating, that means we have an overheating alarm. So the overheat switch normally goes, okay? And then same with A3, then it's overheating, you reset it, overheating again, then you normally get A3, and then you replace the overheat sensor. That is number 78 in the picture here. Okay, you guys should have this coming with a book. And then we got E4, that there's no heating, okay? So that could be your elements, but normally it could be the temperature sensor in the boiler, okay? And what I've done here, you can see it, because if you have an electrician or you check it yourself, you can check it with the ohms of it is good. So of course, if it's not heating, then you don't have to 40 degrees. So if you have an idea what the temperatures of the water, like let's say if it's 10 degrees, then if you're on 103 ohms, then you know the temperature sensor is fine. But with any of those things, you can always give us a call. I have a technical person on staff here, so we can always help you through this, no problem. And then E5, that is when the electrode is not covered, within 180 seconds after the feeder has been started. So this is important to know, especially when you start up the feeder the first time, because we got the header tank, you got the hose coming into the feeder. That sometimes takes more than 180 seconds to fill up, because we got to fill up the whole boiler. Okay, so it is not uncommon if you have the boiler empty that you have to restart the feeder 2 or 3 times before we fill the sensor. Fill the boiler and the water comes into the mixing jar. If the water runs into the mixing jar and the feeder has been sitting still for a while, it could be that the sensors are just covered with a little bit water scale. Sometimes it just helps when the water is in there, you throw a little pinch of milk repacer in it, it sees the sensor, and then after that it works fine. Or what you do, you just brush the sensor a little bit, but it's just a little trick. If the water is running into the mixing jar, but for some reason the sensor does not pick it up, throw a little bit, pinch of milk repacer, just put a little pinch between your fingers, throw it in there, and then it will start up, and after that you're fine. Just a little trick. Quickly, routines. I'm running a little bit long here. Check the animals, of course, check the functionality of the feeders, and check the mixture for leaking. Make sure there's no leaking going on anything like that. Routines. With the feeder, you also get this cleaning pistol, so you can use it with a sponge to run through the hoses. I normally like to take the hoses myself to the sink, just blow them through with the sponge balls, and then everything is clean. Okay. So do the cleaning, like we already talked about that. You can use detergent. So every week, check, and if necessary, adjust the portion of the powder. To me, you should check at least once a week the powder and the water calibration. And also very important, when you get a new batch of milk repacer, calibrate it. So soon that new batch is being fed, so you put the bag in there, and then the next morning we are feeding that bag now through the machine. Check the powder, because every batch of milk repacer could be different. Okay, even though it's the same milk repacer, but the density could be different. So it's very important that you keep an eye on the calibration. Okay. Then every 6 months, replace all the suction hoses, or if you just have a certain time that you run it, then replace the suction hoses. Empty your powder hopper once in a while. Clean it. Do not use any water inside the powder hopper. Okay, you can use a rag or something. And if the feeder is not used for a few months, make sure it's in a heated area or drain the boiler. And I also recommend that maybe once a week or every 2 weeks, maybe you run a little bit of water through the boiler. Okay, so that nothing gets stained or nothing gets sitting in there for too long. Okay, it's very important. 75% of animals drink about every hour and a half to 2 hours. So that is very common what we see. If you put the lambs or kids in the group, try to have a teacher in there. What I mean with that is there is one in there what already knows what's happening, so they need to teach each other very quickly. But I can tell you, I work mostly with calf feeders. To me, lamb and kids are smarter than calves, I can tell you that much. Okay, because they go through the feeder a lot quicker. I'm not that familiar with this, but we would like to see about a half till 0.6 meters of square meters, sorry, per lamb or kid. It's a little bit of layout. So you got the feeder nicely in the middle, protected, so the animals cannot get to the feeder, cannot chew on cables, because they like to do that. So it will save you some work, of course. It's flexible. You don't have to be there every day. You can just come whenever you want. Just make sure the machine is running. Keep the milk replacer in there. We got adjustable front plates. They come with it. So the one on the left, that is how it's normally done. The one on the right, you see the nipple on the outside. That is more for the training. So I like to see a pen with smaller babies. That's where you put the nipple on the outside. So it's very easy for them to get to. But once you get bigger and you have 20 or 25 in the pen, you want to do it on the left, because otherwise they will butt each other out. Okay. But the one on the bottom, on the right, that is for training. Then we got two different teats. We got the brown, normally that's for kids, but I also have people using that for lambs, and vice versa. So whatever you find working best for you. Okay. The white are a bit more expensive. Okay. And that's all I got. So I don't know if there's any questions. I don't see any, unless I missed something here. But I'll stop sharing here now, and then you can see if there's any questions.
That was great, Jan. Thank you. We'll wait a couple minutes and see if anyone puts any questions in, and then
I'll stay on too. So if there's questions afterwards, I will stay on. So
perfect. And then Serena, you can get ready to start with your presentation.
All right. Well, if anyone has any questions for Jan, just post them in the Q&A or the chat. And as he said, he's going to stay on so he can answer them at the end here. As Megan said, my name's Serena. I'm a young animal specialist with Grober Nutrition. I've been with the company for a few years now. I myself am actually a sheep producer. So at the age of 6, I went to a birthday party and came home with 2 orphan ram lambs. So being dairy farmers at the time, my parents weren't super thrilled, but very happy that they allowed me to grow my flock over the years, and it's led me to where I am now. So today I'm going to talk about colostrum and gut health, and they're very related to each other, so it's going to be a lot of crossover. And then at the end, I'm going to share some kind of new research that's coming out about colostrum and some fun things that Grober is doing. So to start, I'm going to introduce Grober. So at Grober, we kind of have 2 mottos, right from the start and more than just milk replacer. So Grober has been manufacturing milk replacer for over 45 years. Getting ahead of myself here. So this has led us to the creation of a premium product that is made to fit every producer's needs. If the animals out there drink milk, we have a milk replacer for them. So we actually produce elephant milk replacers, kitten milk replacers, tiger milk replacers. If they drink milk, we can feed them. Our second motto, more than just milk replacer, has led us to be kind of leaders. So we're always looking for new research, technology, and management practices to help producers raise the best young animals possible. So we actually have our own research station at Woodstock's Outdoor Farm Show. It's called the Grober Young Animal Development Center, also called the GYADC. So if you've ever been to the Outdoor Farm Show, you might have come into our coverall, and hopefully in future years, you'll be able to come and see all of our livestock we have in there. So at Grober, we take pride in manufacturing a high quality premium product. So this starts with raw material testing and finishes with final product testing. So we're testing our products to make sure that they are safe, they're mixable, and they have a consistency to ensure that bag to bag, the product is the same high quality milk replacer that we feed to our own animals. The Grober supports Canadian farmers with on-farm support and additional products to help you raise your own animals. Recently, so this past October, Grober Nutrition got to join the Gailey Cooperative. So we were actually bought by Gailey and now operate under the Gailey umbrella. This actually made us the first integrated milk replacer company in Canada. So we're very happy to be part of the Gailey family. So we will get into lambs and kids. One question that I like to ask any producer that I give advice to is, what is their pre-weaning mortality rate? This is an answer that every producer should know about their own farm. So in lambs, we're aiming for around that 10% mark. And in kids, there's actually some studies going on right now. So the best estimate I can give you is you want it below 20%. Currently, the average Canadian farm, it's between 20 and 30%. So in the dairy cow industry, the pre-weaning mortality gold standard is 7%. And this is compared to in beef cow-calf operations, mortality for Ontario and Quebec is around 5%. Well, these numbers cannot directly translate into small ruminants, as cows are born with a will to live versus small ruminants just want to die on you. It is important that we look at other animal sectors to see where there's areas that us as small ruminant producers can improve. So just overview, I'm going to talk about colostrum testing, kind of litter sizes and how that relates to colostrum, and extending your colostrum fed period. I'm also going to talk about some gut health. I'm going to give a quick overview on how a ruminant's immune system works. Why should we care about gut health? And what can we do to help our animals and their gut health? So to start, why do we care about gut development and gut health? So when we talk about gut health, there's three things that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about kind of the gut health and how it relates to the immune system. I'm going to talk about gut health and the microbiome that is in the gut. And I'm going to talk about gut development and absorption and how those two things are linked. So to kick it off, how does the system work ruminant? So this is a university course. I'm not going to get into that much detail. I am going to be pretty quick. But three quick facts off the top are that ruminants are born entirely dependent on their innate immune system. So this is due to a lack of immune cell transfer in uterine. The ruminant's placenta does not allow the dam to pass any immune cells on to her embryo. The second is that 70% of the animal's immune cells are found within the gut. So when we think of immunity, we need to think of more than just the forces at play that are within the animal's body. We need to think about the external defenses that animal's body does have. And the third thing is that 30% of daily energy requirements of the animal is by the gut. And this 30% is for a healthy gut. So any challenges that an animal might face, such as disease pressure or any repairs that the gut needs to make, this percent of energy requirement is going to increase. So the two broad parts of the immune system are the innate and the adaptive. I'm just going to touch briefly on both, just so you kind of know what I'm talking about. So the innate is the first line of defense. Its main goal is to stop pathogens from entering the animal's body. It's non-specific, meaning it's either going to recognize cells as self or non-self. It's very destructive though. So sometimes while destroying cells that are considered non-self, it is destroying self cells. So this is why the animal needs a more specialized system, which leads us to the adaptive immune system, which gives a more specific response and can create a memory from the cells. So this is just a bit of a graph. And I will get through here so everyone can see. So we've got immunity and the two systems, the innate and the adaptive. So external is kind of what I'm going to touch on today, and that is specifically talking about in the gut. And the adaptive is what I also mentioned. So when we feed colostrum to our animals, we are giving antibodies that are produced outside the calf or lamb or kid, and we're putting it into it. So that would fall under the passive section. So this graph right here is great. So it shows when we feed colostrum, the protection that the animal is going to get slowly over time starts decreasing because the amount of immunoglobulins starts getting used up. But at the same time, the animal's own adaptive immune system is slowly increasing. So we can see this period in here allows for a lot of health challenges. So we really got to be proactive and try and decrease the amount of drastic gap, we'll say, that's available. So how does the immune system work together? So as I mentioned before, 70% of immune cells are in the animal's gut. Therefore, when we're talking about the immune system, we need to think about more than just what's happening. We need to think about gut health. So the external immune system, or the mucosal immune system, is made up of physical, chemical, immunological, and microbial barriers that, as I mentioned before, main goal is to keep pathogens out of the animal. So when we feed colostrum, we're actually going to help increase the amount of immune cells located within the gut. So there was one study that was done, and it looked at animals fed colostrum versus no colostrum. Even at 5 days of age, there was a huge difference in the amount of immune cells located in the gut. So a strong gut is going to create a strong animal because we're keeping that external barrier strong, keeping the pathogens out. So the next point I'm going to talk on is the gut microbiome. And so this refers to the cells, bacteria, and fungi that are living in the lumen of the gut. And these are all part of the immune system. So within the first 48 hours, this environment starts to drastically change. Most change has been noted to be within the first 6 to 24 hours. So our goal when we're feeding animals should be to have an environment in that gut full of good, beneficial bacteria. If we overload the gut with bad bacteria in the first few hours, we're actually going to start that animal off on a negative. So what do we do to prevent this? We want to make sure that we're getting the animal good amount of colostrum. So colostrum is a probiotic that will help colonize the gut by increasing the amount of good bacteria and limiting the resources for bad bacteria. However, if you are feeding a colostrum that contains bacteria, you're going to be doing the opposite. So we want to feed plenty of colostrum, as it can also help decrease the bacteria that has been shown to lead to scours. If we have too much bad bacteria overgrowth, we're actually going to throw the gut off balance, and it can lead to the mucosal immune system failing. So, and kind of my final point when I talk about development of the gut and why it's important, we're going to talk about nutrient absorption. So this, and hopefully you can still see my mouse, this graph or little diagram here shows kind of the villi that are within the gut. So these little cells that are all the way along here, those are the epithelial cells. Normally they're created down here, and they migrate up and they start absorbing all the nutrients, and when they get to the top, they die and shed off. So colostrum has been shown to actually stimulate more cells being created down here, therefore increasing the size of this villi. So it's important that we want the biggest villi possible because it's going to create more surface area, which means more nutrients absorption. So this is the reason that there's more crypt cell proliferation, is because of the growth factors and hormones that are found in colostrum. So there's been working from home joys. I'm sure you can hear my dog. So there's been studies done on calves who've been fed colostrum versus calves that have been fed a similar product to colostrum, but it was lacking the growth factors and hormones. And this is how they found that colostrum helps increase absorption. So they've also found in these studies that the epithelial cells, so these little guys here that are responsible for the nutrient absorption, have increased lifespan. So glucose absorption is another thing that they're also studying, and they found that glucose absorption is increased. So similar to how if you feed IgGs quickly, more is absorbed. The quicker that you feed colostrum, the more glucose is absorbed. So there's lots of new research coming out about the further benefits of feeding colostrum than just IgG absorption. And this will be kind of last slide on gut health, but this is a very interesting thing that's being looked at right now in calves. So they found that feeding colostrum helps stimulate anabolic metabolism. So the anabolic metabolism pathway is taking nutrients that we feed, so we'll feed like amino acids, and turning them into larger molecules like protein. So what they're saying is calves that are fed colostrum can better use those protein synthesis on skeletal muscles. As well, they found that calves have a greater fat absorption when fed colostrum and are able to utilize glucose. Therefore, they don't have to use their own body stores that they're born with for energy, which is huge, and especially in small ruminants might be something to look at. As we all know, small ruminants are born with very little fat. So, what are some management practices that we can do to help our babies with their guts? So the number one thing is keep a clean maternity pen. So this is the first place that our animals are landing. They're being born into it. If it's full of manure, it's wet bedding, we don't want that. We're introducing too much bad bacteria. As well as when the lambs and kids are born, the first thing they do is get up and try and nurse. So if our dams are laying in dirty bacteria-filled bedding, and those lambs are latching onto those teats, it's just going to create a bad environment for that. We also want to make sure that if we're artificially rearing lambs, that we're using clean equipment and we're cleaning it daily. So this is equipment that will link on with milk. So this means your pails, your nibbles, your bottle, and if you funnel, make sure you're cleaning your funnels. Another thing that we want to be doing is having free choice access to creep, water, and forages. And this is going to help increase the maturation of the stomach and the intestines. So we want to introduce this as soon as possible because it does take a few weeks for the animals to start utilizing this nutrients and build up their gut development. And lastly, I think I've mentioned it a couple times, we want to be feeding colostrum. It needs to be fed quickly, of high quality. We need to feed it a proper quantity, and it needs to be clean. So at Grober, we do keep gut health in mind when we are formulating milk replacers. A lot of producers in the small ruminants like to feed an acidified product. So this is our Lamb Grow A+ or our Kid Grow A+. Acidified milk replacers are partially acidified, meaning that they're manufactured with acids to have a final mixed pH of around 5.5. This helps with gut health by creating an inhospitable environment for bacteria and slowing their growth. At the Grober Young Animal Development Center, we had two groups. One was fed a mildly acidified milk replacer, and the other was fed a non-acidified milk replacer. The mildly acidified milk replacer had less health events, responded better to treatment, which improved their growth compared to a group that was fed non-acidified milk replacer. One point to keep in mind is that partially acidified milk replacers should be fed warm and cannot be left out for extended periods of time. If you do want to leave out milk for ad lib feeding, it needs to be fully acidified with the use of an additional acids. So the next thing that Grober has done to help milk replacer increase gut health is the addition of medium chain fatty acids into our fat profile. So the combination of fatty acid sources can decrease the amount of certain bacteria. So in 2019 at the GYADC, Grober did a test on lambs. So we had one group that was fed a standard milk replacer, and the other was fed the same milk replacer, but with the addition of elevated levels of medium chain fatty acids. The lambs that were fed the elevated levels grew better and did not experience any degree of bloat compared to lambs that were on the controlled diet. We also saw an increase in the amount of pellet consumption by the lambs that were fed the elevated levels of medium chain fatty acids. And a possible explanation is due to the lambs feeling less digestive upset. So they felt better, so they were going to eat more. And lastly, Grober is going to be launching a new product coming sometime maybe this summer. I'm just teasing everyone, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, but this product's going to help with gut health and has antibacterial properties. This product's actually added to a lot of milk replacers over in Europe, so it's widely used over there and loved, but you're just going to have to wait and see what it's about. And a couple from points, since I've been talking a lot about colostrum this presentation. The first is colostrum testing. So this is kind of becoming a new thing that small ruminant producers are talking about, but it's common practice used in the dairy cow industry. One reason is due to handling and accessibility of the dairy cow. So this is something that the dairy, sheep, and goat industry might be kind of leaning towards. This past lambing season, I actually did my own at-home experiment. Due to COVID, I was stuck at home a lot more than normal, so this allowed me to test the majority of ewes that land at my farm. This process didn't take any more time than normal. So when my ewes lamb, I moved them into claiming pens and then would strip their teats just to make sure that the wax plug was out. So as I was doing that, I would just strip a little bit of milk onto my refractometer and it would spit out an answer for me. I was actually able to find that I had a wide range of IgG levels. So one of my mature ewes had a Brix reading of 48%, while one of my first-time lambers had only a 28% Brix. So right now, there's studies being done to look at the Brix levels that small ruminant producers should be aiming for. So in the dairy cow industry, they want nothing less than 22%. So it's definitely something that is going to be coming out with more and more research. So definitely keep your eyes open for that. The second thing, and this is probably common knowledge to most people out there, but a great reminder, is that there's been studies done on the serum IgG levels of different kids from different litter sizes. So serum IgG levels are a test to see how much IgGs that animal has absorbed into their bloodstream. So if it's below a certain threshold, it's considered failure of passive transfer, as in that animal doesn't have enough immune cells in their blood. So they actually found when they did this study that triplets were having failure of passive transfer. What does this mean? It means that we need to be supplementing our triplets with powdered colostrum or pooled frozen colostrum because they're not getting enough IgGs. And my third and final thing is extending the colostrum feeding period. So there's lots of research being done in the dairy cow industry about feeding colostrum for an extended period of time. So for 14 days after they're born. The idea behind it is when we have dairy animals or any animal that produces milk, actually, they're going to produce colostrum that first day, and it's going to take a few days for them to start producing normal milk. So this is called transition milk. When we artificially rear animals, we feed them colostrum for the first day, and then on the second day, we start feeding them milk replacer. So the idea behind it is to slowly transition them onto milk replacer. It's been shown that it helps by feeding this colostrum for an extended period of time. It helps to stimulate early intestinal development. It'll provide additional calories to prevent hypothermia, as we all know colostrum is high in fat. And it's also been shown to reduce the need for antibiotic intervention pre-weaning, which is huge because of all the antibiotic regulations that have come out. As an on-farm practical, it might not work for all the producers. If this is something that you're interested in doing, definitely reach out to one of your young animal specialists, and we can try and come up with a solution that'll kind of help this. It is a challenge for any producer that is maybe doesn't have smaller group sizes for their new babies, but definitely something we can work with all producers if you are interested in extending your colostrum period. And with that, I am done. So I want to everyone in, and my contact information is at the bottom there if you do want to chat with me or have any questions about my presentation. As Megan said, it is going to be recorded, so if you had to tune out at any point, we'll send it out to you so you can hear it. So I'll just end that, and if anyone has any questions, I guess now is the time. All right, so the question is, many consumers of mine are using milk replacers for lambs without adding more acid, and they let the boiler for 12 hours. Is this dangerous for bacteria? All right, so yes. So we don't want to leave a partially acidified or a non-acidified milk replacer sitting out, because as you did mention, it is going to allow for bacteria growth. Bacteria love a nice warm environment, and milk replacer has sugars in it, which bacteria love to eat and replicate with. So any producer that is choosing to leave it out for that 12-hour period, I would definitely recommend the use of acid to fully acidify it. You can get the acid from any farmer's pharmacy has some, and it is not an expensive additive, and it's quite easy to use. If your producer does choose to go that route, have them contact us, or you can contact us. It does need to be agitated every so often, just because things can separate.
There's no other questions. Feel free to reach out to us anytime if anything does come to mind. We're here and happy to help. And with that, I guess we'll end this webinar, and thank you everyone who logged on, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.